Erev Tov, Erev Tov. So whenever I come back from Israel, I take you a little bit on a field trip. I did this last time we came back. And just to share a little bit of the excitement in the world of Torah and the Ben Midrash, and what we'll be hearing. You'll be hearing new names and new things and new concepts, so you should know where they started and where they come from. And I remember sitting at the table telling you we got the books of Rabbi Yosef when I came back from Muncie. Talking about last year when I was in Israel, I came back with the whole library of Rabbi Uziel, so on and so forth. So this time, a little bit different, but Rabbi Yosef used to write in his letters, this is what I captured in my net. You know, this is what I caught. So this is a fish that we caught. If we're talking about fish, this book was probably the most interesting of them all that I got when I was in Israel. This book is called Dag Chai, Dag Net, which really is a pun on the Hebrew of saying either you want to be a live fish or a dead fish. They gave this to me at the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's all about the evils of people who have smartphones. And how the computer screens spray poison at you through the screen. And the Rotzeach HaCellulari, the murderous cell phones that have not left any stone unturned. They throw little Jewish kids out the window and all kinds of wonderful things like that. When I came in, this is the book that fell on the floor. So
how did they pay you to take that book?
You know, it's a kosher website, but it's really in the mouth of a lion waiting to kill you. They handed it to me, so I figured I'd take it. Why not?
At the cover of Barshu?
Yeah, sure. Last time I was there, they handed me leaflets about a rabbi who started a yeshiva with secular studies, how terrible he was. You know, you should pray at the grave that he should die. Everyone of the things
at the grave that he should die.
Every one of the things that interest them.
Well, I guess he didn't tell me to promote to yeshiva. That's just...
I dressed the part. I was looking good that day.
They didn't tell you that you teach us that when collectors come around, we should ask them, "Oh, do you support the state of Israel?" You teach your boys.
I had better than clip-on payot. I have a wife who speaks Yiddish, so it works.
I sent you the thing with the clip-on tzitzit this morning.
That I saw.
The fake ones with the fake Kehillat.
Don't laugh. I've seen people even here in SeaWorld with those things.
Why?
Yeah, it's a messianic thing. A lot of these, they're clipping on their tzitzit.
Oh, clip-on.
Yeah.
You've seen them too?
I've heard of them, yeah.
So, when I landed in Israel, I got there for a Kenes Rabbinic, for a rabbinic conference, in which I spoke. I'm in the middle of typing up the words that I said and that I wanted to say, and I originally intended to say. Some of you may have heard, there's a famous speech by the Sephardic chief rabbi who spoke there, said some wonderful things about different Jews around the world. That was sarcastic. About him, Achashverosh told Haman, Hagam nichbosh et hamalka imi babayit. You want to conquer the queen, but don't do it while I'm home. Achashverosh told Haman, remember Haman is falling on the bed, Esther is there. He said, what, you want to take my wife while I'm home? So he came to the yeshiva and he spoke and he spoke and he spoke all about the things that the graduates of the yeshiva do and how bad they are. And parrots and everything else that's included there. That's okay. The speech that I gave before then was how a rabbi has to function independent of any major rabbinic organization, including the chief rabbinate. Who's the chief rabbinate? What is the chief rabbinate? And that's a speech I gave right before the chief rabbinate came. So
you're the grand intro for that.
So to each their own. But that was the introduction. That was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I had a plan, to go get some books. When I fly to Israel, I don't bring any Sfarim with me. My mother-in-law doesn't only call them books, because books are secular books and Sfarim are Jewish books. I tried to tell her that if you buy a James Patterson novel in Hebrew at the bookstore, they call it a sefer, not a book. It's a book means sefer, sefer means book. These words are used interchangeably, but it was complicated to understand. So I never fly with books. So I got there, and I was planning at least one book I should have Shabbat, something to learn from. And as I went to the bookstores Erev Shabbat, everything was closed. And Shamayah, Kadosh Baruch Hu helped me, and book landed in my hands I've been looking for a long time. Let me just find this for a second. It's brown. This book is a book of Rabbi Faur. So if you know Rabbi Faur, I've suggested different books for you in English.
Okay.
And this is, to the best of my knowledge, the only book he wrote in Hebrew. This book is about a Sephardic rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Chazan. It's a good place to start. This is the book that I had that first Shabbat. It's the only book I had that Shabbat. And in there he writes something fascinating, which I think should really enlighten us about everything else that's on this table. He writes the following. HaSefer hazeh ben chodesh yamim hu. This book is 1 month old. This book has been out of print since 1977. How did I get this copy? It happened to be the bookstore that I went to just bought out a bookstore that closed. And they had 2 copies of this book that they didn't know what to do with. So I took both. Why? Just to make sure. It's Pidyon Shuvim. I want to capture, save the captive. V'chibartiv b'zman sheno lo yom v'lo layla. I wrote this book when it was not day and not night. Hadvarim yiduim. Everything written in this book is known. Kimat ve'en behem min ha'chidush. Min ha'chadash. There's nothing new in this book. I'm not going to tell you anything new. By the way, most great books start off with the author telling you, I'm not going to tell you anything new. These are things that people know. And then, well, we never heard that before. Af al pi ken, reiti la'alotam al ha'sefer. But nonetheless, I felt that I have to write them down in a book. Ki darkam shel ha'rabanim ha'sfaradim. It's the way of the Sephardic rabbis. Yitzirotehem b'chol chelkei machshavet Yisrael. Their creations, their literature, on all the different disciplines in Jewish thought. V'ashkafotehem al yahadut bichlal v'al bayot hazman ha'chadash bifrat. And their perspective and philosophy on Judaism as a whole, and particularly in the new things, the new problems facing the Jewish people. Einam yiduim. They remain unknown. The approach of Sephardic rabbis to matters of the world remain largely unknown. Mashu, something, chala b'chodesh hanogea lamasoret hatarbutit. Hadatit v'achinuchit shel Yehudim haSfaradim b'yameinu. That something has changed in the way that the world understands Sephardic culture, religion, and education. Dvarim sheba'avar hakarov hayu yduim lechol tzur v'darabanan. Things that in the recent past every rabbi knew, everyone who studied in the Beit Midrash knew these things. Einam yduim hayom afilu le'ele asher b'shem gdolei hador yichunu. Even the great rabbis today that are called the leaders of the generation don't know the things about Sephardic Judaism that the little students of yesterday knew. Something has been erased. It's been forgotten. אנחנו אז, שגדלנו על פי המסורת החינוכית העתיקה, שהתקיימה דור אחר דור בבתי מדרש ספרדים, we, he's talking about himself, who grew up in the Sephardic בתי מדרש, who studied the Sephardic tradition generation after generation, רואים את המצב החדש בדיכאון לב וכיליון עיניים. We're looking at this depressing situation with great sadness. מה יעשה הנער שרוצה לגלות את העבר שלו? What will a young person do who wants to discover their past? לאן יפנה? Where will he turn? מי יורה לו את הדרך? Who will show him that way, that path? Then it goes on to write a poem that I can't read and translate now. About Chachamim who've decided that it's better for them to be quiet than to speak. Because speaking truth in the generation of today is a very dangerous act. And therefore, most Chachamim are smart enough to know to be quiet. And those who speak are those who rule.
It certainly improved since 1977, right?
Right. It only got worse. That poem that was written a few hundred years ago. That poem was written in Italy of 1847.
Wow, so it wasn't his poem either.
It wasn't even his poem. It was a poem from 100 years before. Let's see a sentence here. Another time. That book on Rabbi Moshe Chazan. Maybe I once quoted for you a teaching of Rabbi Moshe Chazan. We're doing here the Slichot series. Rabbi Moshe Chazan was talking about all these halachic rules. Who was Rabbi Moshe Chazan? Do you remember? Sephardic rabbi from Italy, chief rabbi of Livorno. He was famous for having a pity. Rabbi Moshe Chazan not from Livorno. Rabbi Moshe Chazan is from Israel. He ended up traveling to England. He became a big rabbi in England, representing the Sephardic and Ashkenazi rabbis of Israel in London. He came there initially to fight the reform movement that was there. He finds himself, you may remember a quote like, the sickness of fanaticism. I quoted on Shabbat. This was him. He says the sickness of fanaticism has caused that when he had to defend the Jewish faith, by using books like the New Testament, or arguing philosophy with people, he was considered a heretic for quoting books that he was using to defend the Jewish faith. And he said the sickness of fanaticism is at risk of causing the pleasant faith of the Jewish people to disappear from our midst. The emunah ha'ne'imah, the pleasant faith. He says soon we're going to be left with a very unpleasant faith. He was warning us that if we allow the sickness of fanaticism to take over, then the rest is literally history. We can forget about a Judaism that people love. And he was a big believer in that, and unfortunately we're paying the price of a Judaism that looks just like that. I'm talking to you about the UK and about London, so there's these books that are quite exciting. I've been looking for these books for a long time. They've been reprinted finally after years of being out of print. The Keter Shem Tov, you may have seen this in two different places. There's a Hasidic Keter Shem Tov, which is written, I don't think it's written by the Baal Shem Tov, but it's teachings of the Baal Shem Tov on the Chumash. That's the famous Keter Shem Tov that Ashkenazim know, is the one of the Baal Shem Tov. There's another Keter Shem Tov. If you ever look at a Sephardic booklet for Rosh Hashanah, so you have Simanim. What are Simanim? All the little foods you eat, the head of a fish, whatever, you know, the pomegranates, the dates.
Like the seders.
Exactly. So over there you'll get to a word that's called salka. Most communities have a custom to eat beets.
Yeah.
Over there in most Sidurim it says the Keter Shem Tov records the original Sephardic custom is to eat spinach at that point. That's the original custom. Salka is only a later custom that it became beets, but originally it was spinach. He brings extensive sources to that. Keter Shem Tov, Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, was a chacham that was educated for certain years in European yeshivot and Sephardic yeshivot, finds himself as the chief rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese community in London. You should know the London community for many years was under Sephardic rule. It's not what you think about it today.
Before World War II?
You're talking about Now, there was a period where Jews were not allowed in England at all. Remember this period? The Jews were not allowed. Who was the rabbi that pushed for the Jews to be able to come back?
It was from Amsterdam, wasn't
Yeah, very good.
it? I don't remember the name.
His name was Rabbi Menashe ben Israel. He was a famous rabbi in Amsterdam. He was the rabbi of another famous Jewish man, infamous if I might say. You know who his student was?
Was it Moses Mendelssohn or was it
I think Amsterdam. Spinoza, very good. It was
yeah.
Rabbi Spinoza. Now we have a famous painting of him. A famous painting of him that they claim is made by his friend Rembrandt. I've read academic essays that claim that him and Rembrandt probably didn't know each other, but it seems that in Jewish traditions there are traditions that him and Rembrandt were friends. Nonetheless, the portrait we have of him is done by an artist of his time. He wrote a number of books. Nishmat Chaim, he has a book on eternity of the soul, interesting Kabbalistic thoughts. Rabbi Menashe ben Israel wrote books in Hebrew, in Aramaic, in Spanish, in Portuguese, and ultimately he also wrote books in English. He wrote books in English to the British government trying to convince them to allow Jews to come back to the United Kingdom. And even though in his lifetime he wasn't successful, ultimately when Jews were allowed back in, he was credited with being the one who turned history and allowed the Jews to re-enter Europe. When I was now in London, somebody told me, I don't know if it's true, somebody told me that even in London today, the spelling of names in Gittin predominantly is spelled in the Sephardic way, because the rabbis of London were, the ruling rabbis of London were Sephardim until fairly recent in history, where that switched over. The Keter Shem Tov is a book that's 7 volumes, now printed in 4, but 7 volumes on all the minhagim. Now, I'll show you the cover page. He writes here, it's in English, the rites and ceremonies and liturgical variants of the Sephardim of the East and West and Ashkenazim, their origin and significance based on the Talmud, Babylonian and Palestinian, and all ancient and modern codes and treatises by the very revered Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin, ecclesiastical chief of the Spanish and Portuguese Jewish congregations of England, and principal of the Judith Montefiore Theological College in Ramsgate. This book was printed in 1934 and reprinted recently. In 98 was a reprinting. It's very hard to find these books. The man who I ordered them from brought them to me to Yerushalayim. Literally, as I was packing my suitcase for the taxi, I got this set of books. And then when I landed here in America, I started opening it to read it. Now he has Haskamot here from Rabbi Yaakov Meir, who was the rabbi of... Who's Rabbi Yaakov Meir? He's the chief rabbi of Israel, before the state of Israel. He's the rabbi of another famous chief rabbi, Rav Uziel. Rav Uziel essentially took over the chief rabbinate of Israel from Rabbi Yaakov Meir. Rabbi Yaakov Meir, we don't have very many writings from him. There's a period in his life where he went back to Turkey to take on the mantle of chief rabbi. And you should remember that under that period, Israel and Turkey were really one large empire. And he goes back there, and then he wrote a commentary on the whole Shulchan Aruch. It's a fairly recent Sephardic commentary on the whole Shulchan Aruch. And one night, this house went up in flames, and all of his handwritten manuscripts burned. Rabbi Yaakov Meir writes that every time he picked up his pen to rewrite his commentary, he would cry so much he wasn't able to write. So at the end of his life, I think we have maybe a few papers from him. We don't have books from him. All of his handwritten manuscripts, we lost. So Rabbi Yaakov Meir gave a letter of approval to this Sefer, Kehillat Shem. It's perhaps the most authoritative modern encyclopedia of Sephardic and Ashkenazi customs, mostly Sephardic. And the great work that he did here was to explain to people what Eastern Sephardim do, what Western Sephardim do. So Spain, Portugal, maybe parts of North Africa, not the Moroccans, but the Spanish Moroccans. So the communities of Megorashim. Who are the Megorashim?
Those who ran from Spain to Morocco.
Yeah. Those who ran away from Spain to Morocco.
In 1492.
Yeah, mostly people from Castilla. That's the community that was most prominent there. You should know, in Morocco, there were wars between the Moroccan Jews and the Spanish Jews. And today, everyone became Moroccan. But in Morocco, it wasn't all Moroccan. There were different kinds of Moroccans. And different communities, Tangier and Fez. And different communities had different minhagim based on where they originally came from. The influx of certain Ashkenazi customs into Morocco happened when the Spanish Moroccans came to Morocco. And there were wars over those things as well. By the way, in some places, those who really understand history will be able to point to variants in Moroccan communities even today. If you understand their history, you'll know where some of these wars come from and how they're still existent today. Kehillat Shem Tov is a book that records all the Sephardim, the East and the West, and then compares them with Ashkenazi customs that he was very familiar with. If I'm not mistaken, he also has smicha from Rav Chaim Berlin, who was one of the Ashkenazi rabbis in New York. And so he was very familiar with different traditions. He wrote some things that made people not so happy with him. And I don't know, I'm not an expert in his writings, I just got his books. But just something off the top of my head I recall from the Kehillat Shem Tov. We once had a shiur here about lighting candles, making a bracha before you light candles or after you light candles. Yeah, you remember this? And there was a famous Rabbanit, an Ashkenazi Rabbanit, who she's either the wife of the Drisha and Prisha, there's a commentary on the two, or she's the mother. I don't remember if she's the mother or the wife. The famous Rabbanit. And she says that women should make a blessing before they light candles. Like the Talmud, like the Rambam, like the Shulchan Aruch, and not like the Ashkenazi custom. And he quotes that the Rabbanit wrote that that's what women should do. And the Magen Avraham, who's an Ashkenazi commentary on Shulchan Aruch, he rebuts, he argues with her. And instead of arguing with her on a halachic level, his arguments for why you can't rule like her, anyone know the statement he said there?
Condition.
He says, En chokhmah benashim. Women don't have any wisdom. So how do you rule halakha like a woman? Women are unintelligent beings. Like that. Kehillat Shem Tov is, what are you talking about? What about the daughters of Tzlufchad? What about the great women throughout history that were Talmidot Chachamot? So when we're talking about women, a woman give an opinion, you're not talking about some lady from the market who's selling you fish. You're talking about a Talmidah Chachama. Of course a woman has wisdom. If she's a wise woman, she has wisdom. You're like Rav Uziel. Rav Uziel, when they told him that women shouldn't be able to vote because there are stupid women, he said, "What? Are you lacking stupid men in the Jewish community?" That's a good. It's a good reason why stupid people shouldn't vote. But stupid women, you also have stupid men. That's what Rav Uziel writes in the Tshuva. So Kehillat Shem Tov clearly upset enough people that in the reprinting of the book, I have to read this to you because it says, "Moda'ah, warning, notice." It should be known to any person who reads this book Sharav HaMechaber Zichrono Livracha, that the author of blessed memory, Palat Kulmuso Kama V'chama Dvarim Tmuhim. His pen spat out some very strange things in his writing. Not God forbid that he wrote it, but his pen, like his ink spilled and it wrote some very strange things. ותועלת הספר הוא רק לעניין מה שהעיד על קיומם של מנהגים רבים בכמה וכמה קהילות שאין להם זכר במקום אחר, והוא המקור היחיד לידיעות אלו, לכך העדרנו את הספר שנית. So the only reason we even reprinted this book a second time is because he is the origin, he's the only record of some old customs. He's the only one who knew them and recorded them, and therefore without this book we wouldn't have a source for the customs that we do, but that's the only reason we printed this book. Don't get carried away to think that some of the things he wrote here are reliable or trustworthy.
Wow. After he get the skama from all those rabbi, this little fellow
who reprinted the book, and by the way, it's not enough. He didn't just put it in the first volume. In every single volume, he put this warning here in the bottom. Every single one. It's a disclaimer that you should be careful when you read the book.
Wow.
Now, I'm praying that he didn't censor anything more than just putting a warning. But that's the kind of thing that happens. These books go off the shelf. Then there's people who feel like, hey, you know what, the rabbis yesterday believed is not good enough for us anymore. They edit it, or they warn you about it. Rabbi Yosef Masas. I just came across a writing of a Sephardic Chacham, who you know, I want to say his name. He says Masas. Masas is the acronym of people who make halachic mistakes. That's the acronym. He's one who led many people to make mistakes in halakha. Another rabbi wrote, you can't even study his books. He was kosher as a witness in a Jewish court, but more than that, you can't rely on his writings. And he makes us wonder, what happened? What happened to the community? But if that's what Sephardic Chachamim are saying about other Sephardic Chachamim, then it shouldn't surprise you that other rabbis don't even know that these rabbis exist. And it should give you a little bit of a desire to push the writings of these Chachamim forward, so other people will hear about them. So we did Nisa Moshe Chazan, we got the Keter Shem Tov. Let me pass this right there. Which takes me to Rabbi Uziel. Rabbi Uziel, who you know, you've known a lot about him here. His books are hard to come by, and especially now there was after his books were printed for many years, again, many of his books are out of print. One of his students, Rabbi Dr. Ezra Barnea, he's, to the best of my knowledge, I've met him a few times. To the last of my knowledge, he's one of the last living students, maybe the last living student of Rav Uziel. I don't know if there's anyone else alive who learned by Rav Uziel. And he decided to make an essential Rav Uziel reader. Some of the most important teshuvot that Rav Uziel wrote, to put them in 2 volumes that are easily available for anybody to find them, that at the very least, if his books go out of print again, at least the main teshuvot that he wrote should be reprinted. And he did a job here calling Mipiskei Hazman, from the rulings of the time. These are halachic questions that people should know, that they were discussed, or Chachamim who dealt with them. Issues as small as, can you cut toilet paper on Shabbat? To as big as, can a woman be a judge on a bedin? Can a woman run for president of Israel? According to halakha, obviously in Israel it's okay. Rav Uziel ruling, yes. What about the Talmud? Remember Rabbi Yosef Zernigan was here, and he quoted a Rambam. Rambam says that a woman cannot be a king. Why? A woman is prohibited, according to the Rambam, to be in a position of sarah, of authority. What kind of authority? Authority which is forced on people that don't want her. But if the people want her, meaning if you're in an elections and you vote for a woman to be a president, a mayor, a governor, whatever it is you vote, a judge, Supreme Court justice, then you're showing that of course you want her to be your leader, and therefore of course it's okay. Rav Uziel went to war against Chachamim in his generation. And he believed very strongly that in positions of leadership, if the community wishes for a woman to be in those positions, she not just is okay, but she could and very well should be in those places. And when people attacked him, all kinds of things. What about tzniut? What about things we're going to talk about? It's not proper for men and women to sit together at city hall meetings. What are you going to be talking about in a city hall meeting? She's the president. She's the mayor. What are you just sitting there making jokes with you? She's talking serious things. Rav Uziel was adamant that this was something, and you should know that his opponent, the biggest opponent in this regard, was Rav Kook, alav shalom. Rav Kook believed very strongly that women shouldn't vote. That women should not hold public office. I got in a fight with somebody recently. A dear friend of mine. I love Rav Kook very much. Rav Kook is painted to be the visionary of the future who knew all the answers to everything that will be, but it's not always accurate. Rav Kook was a big tzaddik. Perhaps, in Rav Peretz's word, one of the most underappreciated tzaddikim of the last generation. I believe that very strongly, especially in the Anglo-Jewish community who don't even know the things that he wrote. But there were things that Rav Kook wrote that it's okay for us not to agree with him. And we had Chachamim Baruch Hashem that were his colleagues that he was friendly with that had, in our opinion, I'm saying he's wrong, no, but a better approach. An approach that's more sustainable for the Jewish future. Rav Uziel was one of those Chachamim. It's okay. Rav Kook wouldn't be offended that you ruled like his best friend. It's alright. Talking about ruling like people we don't rule like, I was sitting around that same Shabbat table where I said the Dvar Torah on Friday night. My father-in-law didn't love it so much, and my brother-in-law got in a conversation with me about whether or not you should go to the mikveh every morning before you pray. I said, listen, I'm a Hasidic Jew. No, you the Hasidim do what you do. Leave me alone. What do you mean? The Rambam went to the mikveh every day before he prayed. I said, please, show me. I'm going to show you. I said, it's the Mishnah Torah? No. Where? He quoted a rabbi who quoted the Rambam that he went to the mikveh every day. I said, you and I have been in the game long enough to know that on Shabbat, when you make tea and hot water on the fire, it's forbidden on Shabbat, right? In a second cup, it's forbidden according to Chachamim. In a third cup, it's already not considered cooking. And therefore, you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. So, Klish L'Chi and Om Vasher. A third cup of hot water doesn't cook. When you quote me somebody who quoted the Rambam, it's already not cooking anymore. It's not a reliable source of information. But it's a big rabbi. I know it's a big rabbi, but a famous big rabbi you're quoting was originally, in the beginning of his life, one of the opponents of the Rambam. So how can I trust him? It's a very important thing you should know. Very often when you listen to people who debate each other, don't listen to the one who's debating when they tell you what the other person believes. Very often, you find this in politics, you find this in religion. Let me tell you, well, those rabbis believe this, let me tell you what the response is. That's not what those rabbis believe. You're misrepresenting what they believe, and it's very easy for you to misrepresent them and then have a good answer. It'd be much harder pressed to say, hey, go look at what they say, and then when you read what they say in their writing, come back to me and I'll answer them. Very often, and many, many, many historians in the writings of the Rambam rely on the opinions of the opponents of the Rambam to figure out what the Rambam actually believed. Some of the things that the world thinks the Rambam believed, the Rambam never said. His opponent said that. The historians who were ignorant in the Rambam's own philosophy codified them. And then who do we rule like ultimately? We know about the Rambam through the eyes of his opponents. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with this source. So, Motzei Shabbat, he tells me there's a letter of the Rambam to Chachmei Lunil, the rabbis of Lunil. And in there, the Rambam says, they accused him that he didn't go to the mikveh every morning. I said, what do you mean I don't go to the mikveh every morning? I go to the mikveh every morning. From when I could remember, except for the days when I was sick, I went to the mikveh in the morning. But I'm not against you going, you want to go to the mikveh, go to the mikveh in the afternoon also. But to obligate something in halakha is... And the truth is, I looked it up in the letters of the Rambam. And letters of the Rambam says that he went to the mikveh every morning. Huh? Now I'm stuck. So when I went to go pick up those books, the Kehillat Shem Tov, I was standing by the checkout line in the World Sephardic Library, and I look to the right of me, and I see this set of books. This set of books, they're not very attractive. They don't stick out from the library. Wow, this is the books you need. I was in line, and it said, books of memory for Rabbi Yitzchak Nissim. Who's Rabbi Yitzchak Nissim?
Someone's chief rabbi of Israel.
The chief rabbi of Israel after Rav Uziel, after Rabbi Yaakov Meir. So he was the chief rabbi after Rav Uziel. Yitzchak Nissim left behind a few books. I've taught you some of his teshuvot here. We've done some of his letters before. He has one volume of questions and answers called Yain Hatov, the good wine, and another posthumous compilation of his letters to different people, to different writings. So this is printed by Rav Nissim's organization. When a big Talmid Chacham dies, normally what they do by the first Askara, by the first Yortzeit, or the 10th Yortzeit, or some big Askara date, they ask all of the Talmidei Chachamim that were familiar with him to write an essay in his honor, his memory, his merit. And then they publish them in a book. So normally those letters have nothing to do with Rabbi Yitzchak Nissim, but they're written by some very influential figures. You open up the book, you find from Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, you find from Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, you find from some big rabbis. And I see there's one that says Rambam. It's on the Rambam. And I opened it up, and this is only from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to believe sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All the time, but sometimes you have to especially believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you know, when I wanted to buy this book, I just wanted to buy this one. And the guy said, "Are you crazy? Nobody's going to buy those books. So if you want to buy it, you have to buy all three of them." I shouldn't have told him that I really wanted this book. So I ended up buying all three, two of which I'll use, one which it's going to sit on the bookshelf till I find somebody else who needs to read it. And in here, there's a discussion about the Rambam. I'll just open for you. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Yosef Kapach. Heard about him? Yeah. We're going to read his book soon.
That's right. I can't believe you had the time to go through all the stuff between the time you left.
That's right. This Shabbat I didn't sleep so much. So, Rabbi Yosef Kapach says, there are 24 questions that were written in the writings of the Rambam's questions and answers. That based on what's written there, the rabbis of Lunil asked the Rambam certain questions and he responded. And there are 24 answers recorded that the Rambam responded to the rabbis of Lunil. Some of those questions are very simple. They're very juvenile questions. And some of them are not even questions. They're simply the quotes of the Ravad. The Ravad is the commentary on the Rambam who always disagrees with him. Whether in the spirit or the language, something's off with them. Says Rabbi Yosef Kapach, נראה לי ברור, it's glaringly obvious to me, כי כל אותן התשובות שנתייחסו לרבנו הרמב"ם כתשובות השאלות של חכמי לונין, that all of those letters that are written between the Rambam and the rabbis of Lunil, אין אף אחת מהן שיצאה מתחת יד רבנו. Not one of those letters were written by the Rambam himself. וכל כולן אינן אלא זיוף, and all of them are forgeries. נעשו על ידי אדם שלא ידע כלל תורת רבנו הגדול ושיטתו. And they were written by a person who didn't even know anything about the Rambam in his philosophy or his halakhic stances. And then he goes on for pages to prove every single letter, showing you how it contradicts, obviously, things the Rambam himself wrote elsewhere. And that these letters are not the language of the Rambam, they don't use the Hebrew of the Rambam, they don't have the content of the Rambam, and nothing in these letters are true.
Wow.
And this is what the argument about the mikveh was based on?
Very good.
That is right.
That letter to Chachamei Lunil that he quoted, the Rambam went to the mikveh every morning, is one of these 24 letters.
Oh, whoops.
Wow. Now, a Rabbi Yitzchak Shilat was another rabbi who printed a lot of the Rambam's books, writes back to Rabbi Yosef Kapach, how can you say such a thing? How can you say these Rambam's letters we know? Everyone knows the Rambam's letters. What are you thinking? And he shows you dating-wise that if they were forgeries, they were forged while the Rambam was still alive. So how can you say the things of the Rambam in his lifetime, they forged letters in his name? And Rabbi Yosef Kapach says, what do you saw? Now, you would never know this if you just got books of Rabbi Yosef Kapach or Rabbi Yitzchak Shilat. But in this volume, they include the back and forth between the two rabbis. Rabbi Yosef Kapach writes back a letter saying, what do you mean? It's not so surprising. He said, I remember when I was growing up in Yemen, that my grandfather, Rabbi Yitzchak Kapach, once there was a town nearby that came to him angry because they had a halachic letter from him with a halachic ruling, and it was wrong. And they were so upset at him. How dare he write such a ruling to them? And he said, well, give me that letter. He said, that's not my handwriting. And that's not my seal. And that's my name, but I didn't write this letter. He said already in his lifetime, people were forging his name on things because they knew it would get places, and who's going to check? So do you think people can forge names of rabbis on letters today?
Oh.
It was worth buying 3 books for that one letter. Because sometimes when you learn Torah, you have to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to send me where I go. I don't know where I'm going. You tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm going, you tell me where. And then you end up somewhere, and Baruch Hashem, these 3 volumes exist, even if they only, I'm sure they have more wisdom in them for later. But for now, they exist to tell you the letters that people claim the Rambam wrote are not actually written by the Rambam. And it should explain to them why almost all the books of the Rambam's letters are this thick, and the one in the edition of Rav Kapach is about half the size of this. Because Rav Kapach shows you that most of the letters that people have in the name of the Rambam are not actually written by the Rambam. The Rambam is a big name that people want to sign up with. Everybody wants the Rambam to be there. Everybody says the Rambam was a rationalist, the Rambam was a Kabbalist, the Rambam was a... Everyone needs the Rambam to be on their team, and because of that, everyone tries to convert the Rambam to their cause. But ultimately, the Rambam was the Rambam, and he didn't always sign off on everybody else's.
The Rambam's health regimens.
That's very good. It's true. That's right.
What about the letter where the Rambam talks about going to Harabai? Is that one of those 24?
I don't know. I'd have to. I would have to look it up. Some want to say that letter that he didn't actually go to Harabait. He went to a big synagogue in Jerusalem. That's those who fight the Rambam on that. They claim that it wasn't even the Temple Mount. Why he would make a big celebration for going to a random synagogue in Jerusalem? That's a good question. And why he would call it the house of God in Jerusalem? It's interesting. We have to look it up. There are many such letters. There's a famous letter that the Rambam wrote at the end of his life. That at the end of his life, he met an old man in the Holy Land who taught him all the secrets of Kabbalah. Yeah, of course. It's a convenient story for people who want to make the Rambam the Kabbalist. True, it's not true, but it's a good letter. And unfortunately, over the years, many people have made these books into...
credos.
Yeah, and they became, many people's philosophy are based on these books. And they're not all accurate. Rabbi Yosef Kapach, if we're on his name, I found a biography of his, written by his granddaughter. When I was in HaShamayim, so I told somebody that we're about to study the writings of Rav Kapach here in the synagogue with the Rambam. Come to Rav Kapach. Why would you teach them about Rav Kapach? I said, why not? He's controversial. First off, that's a good reason. That's a good reason. So why wouldn't you just get another edition that nobody... Why do you always have to look for problems? Sure, Rabbi Yosef Kapach is not just a... It's not like you're reading the Rambam according to Rabbi Yosef Kapach. Rabbi Yosef Kapach is a giant of the Rambam. And it was bothering me that he said this for a while. And not that I think I'm doing something wrong, but maybe we should have gone somewhere more mainstream. Maybe... your Yitzhak works overtime. And I came across here a letter signed by Rabbi Yosef. You find it here. It's signed by Rabbi Eliyahu Bakshi, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Moroccan, the chief Sephardic rabbis and Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel at the time. And it was a certificate given to Rabbi Kapach in honor of his finishing the Rambam that he printed. And they write a beautiful letter here. And they say here that there's nobody else who was fitting to print the Rambam's book except Rabbi Yosef Kapach. Sheken el Rabbi Yosef Kapach nitan lomar, because about him you could say shehu talmido hamuvhak shel Rambam, that he is the primary disciple of the Rambam. And he says here that you could say about him that im haram pnei harambam kepnei achama, pnei Rabbi Yosef Kapach kepnei levana. That the Rambam's face is the sun, the Rabbi Yosef Kapach's face is the moon. And you could then therefore twist around the pasuk in the Torah which talks about Moshe Rabbeinu and Yoshua, and say that Moshe Rabbeinu is to Yoshua what the Rambam is to Rabbi Yosef Kapach, and Rabbi Yosef Kapach is to the Rambam what Yoshua is to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then he says here, Velanu en safek, and we have no doubt, she'ilu harambam haya imanu b'sha'azo, that if the Rambam was with us now on this day, he would kiss Rabbi Yosef Kapach on his head, and he would tell him, Yafeh asita, you did a terrific job. So, I'm not afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid then either, but not afraid anymore. Baruch Hashem, it's a beautiful letter.
And Rabbi Kabach is one of the few rabbis that knew Arabic in the original language.
Right. Well, in Arabic had handwritten manuscripts from the Rambam, from the families, from... Yes, that's correct. But it doesn't help, because there are people who... When he was a Dayan in the Beit Din, so long as he received the salary from the state of Israel, he never once spoke about politics. When they would ask him who he votes for, he would say for Kuf. Kuf is the Communist Party. Did you vote for Kuf? He said, yeah, I vote for Kabach. That's what I vote for. He didn't get involved ever in politics. Only at the end of his life, when he was already retired, Chamar Chaliyahu asked him to vote for the religious Zionist party. Then he agreed to vote for that party. But in his whole life, he never got... And once someone came to him and said, you're talking about politics and this and that. He said, you're supposed to be a Talmid Chacham. What are you wasting your time with these things? You're supposed to be in the yeshiva, studying between Abaye and Rava, Hillel and Shammai. What are you busy wasting your time between this political party and that political party? It's not for you. That's not where your life, not where your head is supposed to be at. And talking about political parties. Here's a great book. This Sefer has not been printed in many, many, many years. This book was written by a rabbi who you know, but you just don't know that you know him. His name was Rabbi Rafael Baruch Toledano.
Oh.
I think you met him. Or his son. Didn't you tell me?
Rabbi Toledano.
The famous rabbi, but an old Rabbi Toledano.
Right.
He wrote a song that you might know. He wrote that song.
Oh.
He was an interesting North African rabbi for the very simple reason that he was the first. People always blame Rabbi Yosef that he was the reason why the Sephardic world went Haredi, but it's not accurate. I didn't turn my watch on. He wasn't the first one. Rabbi Rafael Baruch Toledano had already sent his children to study in a yeshiva in Gateshead. Gateshead is in England. It's gung ho Haredi. He came to Israel, and he voted for Gimel, which is the Agudat Israel political party. That was who he voted for. In those days, he felt that from those parties, that was the most credible one or most important one to vote for. His first book that I ever got, I got in the mail when I was still a rabbi in a different synagogue. And in the mail, they were hunting down Sephardic rabbis. I get a package from Lakewood. Now I know people in Lakewood. Then I knew nobody in Lakewood. Who's sending me books from Lakewood? It says Lakewood Toledano. What are Toledanos doing in Lakewood? So from his grandchildren, they ended up in Lakewood. And they started printing his commentary on the Talmud. Why? You want to show people that, see, Moroccan rabbis knew how to study Gemara also. Of course they did. Who cares? Because in a certain world where halakha doesn't matter, so you need to show people they know how to learn Gemara. So I got a copy of his book, and in there it said, if you like the book, please send $20 back. It's an old way that they used to send books. If you ever buy used books, you'll find very often inside the book it says, if you like the book, please mail this envelope back with $50 or 5 cents or whatever it was at the time. And you see very often that clearly people didn't like the book because the envelope was still there and they didn't mail it back. This book was printed by an organization in Israel, Ahavat Shalom. They print a lot of old Sephardic books. And here, I found letters that he wrote to Rabbi Yosef Masas, the other direction. So we have letters that Rabbi Yosef Masas wrote. But the other side of the puzzle is what was written to him that he was responding to. So, Baruch Hashem, this book came out. We got our hands on that. If you're hanging around in Morocco, so there's 2 more books than in Morocco at this time. There's a book in Morocco called Nahagu Ha'am. Nahagu Ha'am is the people had a minhag. There are many customs. Many people have customs in different communities. In Morocco, what was unusual is that many of the customs were not made by people. They were made by Torah scholars. And because of that, Torah scholars kept a very strict record on why they instituted certain customs. Yeah, I just didn't have room in my suitcase. But there were 2 books that are as thick as this. And they're called the Takanot of the Bedin of Meknes. It's all the rulings of the Bedin, not just rulings, they're amendments to halakha that the Bedin put forth. A wise Ashkenazi rabbi once told me that Sephardic rabbis are very lucky that Ashkenazi rabbis don't know anything about them. Because if they did, they would excommunicate them from the Jewish community. Because the things that we did in the old countries are things that today you would only say, oh, you're reform, or you're conservative. Who amends halakha? A bedin. who feels that they have control over Judaism in a whole country, they sometimes feel they can amend halakha. There were matters of inheritance that were amended, matters of divorce that were amended, different things that different people didn't get involved in, and certain Chachamim did. So the same author, Rabbi David Ovadia, wrote a book that hasn't been printed probably since he passed away, and it's right here. But that brings me to a book that's perhaps one of my favorites, and I've never owned. I've only learned it from the second cup of tea. Not from the third cup of tea, from the second cup of tea. This book is called Mishpatim Yisharim, of a Rabbi Raphael Berdugo, otherwise known in Morocco as the angel Raphael. It's called Hamalach Raphael. When you say Hamalach, you're referring to him. He literally was considered to be an angel in Morocco. He was a Dayan. This book is, interestingly enough, printed in Krakow. So it's printed in Krakow in 1891. I haven't been able to get myself a copy of this for a very long time. This was reprinted by Rabbi Shalom Massas. So this is his letter of reprinting. They didn't change anything since they printed it in Krakow.
No comment.
No comments.
He did not censor it.
But this is a famous... no comment here that it's not reliable to study. Let me tell you why Raphael Berdugo is interesting. There's a psak halacha. You should know. Probably this shouldn't be on camera, but it will stay on camera anyways. I once spoke to a French Talmid Chacham who told me that the problem with the Haredi Jewish community is that they are Karaites of the oral law. Listen to the sentence, because Karaites normally are Karaites of the written law, but they're Karaites of the oral law. If it says something like this in Talmud, they don't have any way to understand it differently than what's written there. Whether you agree with the statement or not, it's interesting. Because there are many people who come around thumping the Shulchan Aruch or thumping the Rambam. Shulchan Aruch says X, you have to do this. And you say, listen, with all due respect, I know you just discovered the Shulchan Aruch yesterday. But we've been learning Shulchan Aruch for a very long time. In fact, some of us learn from people who learn from people who learn from people who learn from Rabbi Yosef Karo. So before you come to us and say how to interpret Shulchan Aruch, maybe you should ask us how we read the Shulchan Aruch, how we were taught to read the Shulchan Aruch. A long time ago, actually not so long ago, when I was giving my class Blazing Old Trails in Cape Town, somebody asked me, Rabbi, all these things that Sephardic rabbis say, there are Ashkenazi rabbis who said some of them too. I said, you're right. So why don't you quote them? I said, very smart. That's a very good question. Because I could quote for you many Ashkenazi rabbis who say many of the things that I believe in. But a long time ago, when I came to San Diego, I was called out for, don't speak for us. Don't tell us what we should believe. Fine, I don't agree. But I understand, I respect it, so I won't. So for every Sephardic opinion that I could bring for you, from everybody who said, from Yosef Massas, you can find a contemporary, most of them, in the Ashkenazi community. For Rabbi Yosef Kapach, who says studying secular studies is good, you can find her, Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, or Rav Soloveitchik. For all the Chachamim that we quote who are Zionists, you can find the Rav Kook. You can find parallels, and Baruch Hashem, Judaism isn't just one ethnicity that is Jewish and one isn't. But sometimes I agree, don't speak for me in things. So, when it comes to Shulchan Aruch, there are people who don't know how to read Shulchan Aruch properly. Sometimes Shulchan Aruch says something, but when Shulchan Aruch says something, it doesn't mean what you think it means. Because the language that is there is different. Give me an example. There's a halakha we spoke about in the first year of studying in Kollel, about wearing the kippah. Do you have to wear a kippah or not?
No.
It's a rabbinical custom.
Well, the Shulchan Aruch says you should not. There's a walk for a moment with to be arrogant, but not.
Right. Shulchan Aruch says that you should not walk 4 steps without your head covered. So, are you allowed to walk with your head uncovered?
Yes, 3 steps.
Yes, 3 steps. Okay, let me rephrase. Are you allowed to walk 5 steps with your head uncovered?
No.
According to Shulchan Aruch?
No, we have to.
Of course you can. Of course you can. The Shulchan Aruch says that you can. How do you know? The Shulchan Aruch didn't say asur. It's forbidden to walk 4 steps. Baruch, why does Shulchan Aruch say it's forbidden? In the same sentence he says,
Arrogantly.
walking arrogantly is forbidden. Asur lelech bekoma zkufa. Very good, Baruch remembers. It's forbidden to walk with your head up high and your back on. That's forbidden. But lo yelech. A person should not walk with his head uncovered. From here you learn that it's a good thing to walk with the head covered. Don't throw off your kippot. No, don't put them in the trash.
Oh, door.
Rather, you don't have to. Who has to walk with their head covered? Chachamim. Where do we know that? The Rambam, in the laws of De'ot, the Rambam writes all kinds of things that people should do. When he talks about wearing a kippah, the Rambam only records that Talmidei Chachamim have to wear kippot. But regular people don't. You know, we had a situation here in San Diego. There was a girl from our community, a young girl, who she was in one of the local schools. And she wanted to wear a scarf on her head for a Shabbat play or something like that. I don't know, they did something, a ceremony for Shabbat. She wanted to wear a scarf. And so she came to school with a scarf, and one of her teachers told her she's not allowed to wear it. Why? Because she's not married. But her mother wears a scarf. Who cares? Like, you're talking about a 7-year-old kid, a 6-year-old kid. Who cares? Her mother wears a scarf. She wants to wear a scarf. The teacher took it off her head. Said, you can't do it. How do I know the story? Because somehow I got to the grapevine that in Rabbi Yoni's community, he makes all the little girls cover their hair. That's how it came to me. They say about you that you make the little kids in the shul, all the girls have to cover their hair. I said, am I still a Mark Twain said that he likes rumors because he hears all kinds of things about himself he never knew. Yeah, so I decided to go have a meeting with this rabbi. I said, let me tell you, please, it's not true. But how did this rumor come about? All of a sudden it came around that this girl said, I don't know how she remembers, that I once said in a shiur that there are poskim who hold that even single girls, when they pray, should cover their hair. I did say such a thing. Who said such a thing? Chamadia says such a thing. Very good. He's not the primary source. I'm not talking here about head covering for married people. Not what I'm speaking of now at all. Can a man say a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, like a blessing, on a drink, without a kippah on? It's not the same as walking. It's different. Saying the name of Kadosh Baruch Hu. If you've ever been to an old Syrian house, the old German Jews were like this also. They had kippot in their pocket. Some North African Jews also, maybe from the more modern of the North African Jews. As soon as it came time to eat or make a bracha, they pulled the kippah out of the head, put it back. These were religious Jews. They were not Jews that were not observant. In fact, I read a story, I don't say his name, about a big Talmid Chacham. He said when he was in yeshiva and he went to visit his rabbis at home, none of them wore kippot. The rabbis of the yeshiva, none of them wore kippot. In the Beit Midrash they wore kippot, but at home, nobody wore kippah. So where do you know that a person has to cover their hair when they say HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name? Maran writes that you have to have your head covered when you say Hashem's name, when you pray, when you're in a Beit Knesset. From here you learn who has to cover their hair when they say Hashem's name. Men and women. Maran doesn't differentiate between a man and a woman. The Rambam says, by inference, meaning you infer that only Torah scholars have to cover their hair when they say Hashem's name, that even a man can make a bracha without Hashem's name, without a kippah on. So according to the Rambam, both a man and a woman do not have to wear kippot when they pray. But according to Maran, both a man and a woman have to wear kippot when they pray. It's nothing to do with being married or not being married. It means when a woman comes to pray and she says Hashem's name, according to Maran, she should wear a kippah. According to the Rambam, she doesn't have to. But the same Rambam who says she doesn't have to also says that her husband doesn't have to.
When you say kippah, you mean just head cover?
I mean a kippah.
Like
you know,
a
like
kippah?
a...
So
yeah,
the
like,
women
a
who
kippah.
wear-
I'm not talking about a scarf.
So women who wear kippot is not considered begedish then?
Wait a second. The women who wear kippot, oh, what do they look at their reform? You hear this a lot. No, maybe they're just possibly halakha like Maran. Maybe you're reform. I don't know, I throw around the word. Why are they all of a sudden a problem now? You even see like old Ashkenazi women who come to the Knesset with these, what do they call them? doilies, right? Like you know, you see them two places in the Beit Knesset. They're either on ladies' heads or they're on the platter for the cookies. For the two places they go.
Or they get double.
And you're like, what is that? Is that a head covering? The answer is yes.
And they get
Yes.
expensive too. There's pearl encrusted ones. And,
How about cookie encrusted ones?
According to Maran,
better.
that's what you need to have a head covering.
Yeah.
So when Maran says lo yelech, you don't have to. It means you really don't. Lo yelech, you shouldn't. It means you're allowed to, but you shouldn't. That's how you read a Shulchan Aruch. You can't just read Shulchan Aruch. It says you shouldn't. It means you can't. It doesn't mean you can't. You shouldn't means you shouldn't. You can't means you can't. Now fast forward many halachot later. In those halachot, chapter Kuf Tzadi Hey, 195, in the laws of Ta'at Mishpacha. Yes? Over there, Maran writes about all kinds of things that a couple cannot do at the time where a woman is in Nida. So, different things that Maran records. One of the things written there, Maran writes, that a person should not pass an object from his hand to his wife's hand, or vice versa. What's the reason for that? Maybe
They will touch one.
they'll touch each other. By the way, is that touching each other prohibited?
Is it a fence?
Which touching is prohibited?
She's a nida.
Yeah, and touching that is affectionate. Show some kind of closeness. By accident, brushing against somebody is not a... You're standing on the bus and someone walks by. Now you're violating a biblical commandment? No. That's the argument about shaking someone's hand. Is shaking someone's hand considered a sign of affection or not? I don't have to agree. I know most people don't agree with me. Somebody gets offended and you don't shake their hand. There's a reason they get offended. What's the difference between holding someone's hand and shaking somebody's hand? It's a split second. Try it. Shake somebody's hand once, and then you want to make them really awkward, just don't let go. It's very awkward very quickly. It's not worth playing with this game with a biblical prohibition. So Chachamim made a gzera. Yeah, but we have here something else. Don't pass an object. Maran writes you shouldn't pass an object from him to her to him. The source of this halakha is from the students of Rashi. The students of Rashi say that their rabbi was careful, he wouldn't even hand a key to his wife, or vice versa. And therefore Maran writes that a person shouldn't do it. Rashi held it was a halakha that you couldn't do it. Most likely Rashi, because he was a Chasidah Kedisha Pusha, was a righteous man, was careful about all kinds of things you don't have to be careful about. How that became a halakha is very interesting. In this book, Mishpatim Yesharim, Rabbi Yosef Berdugo writes that if Rashi didn't say it, Maran would have never written it. And that because the origin of this halakha is not Talmudic, one doesn't have to be as strict about it as everything else in laws of Nidah. It doesn't mean ideally you should be passing things to each other, but it means that it's not the end of the world. Sometimes you go to a place. True story, I'll tell you now. I was once in a place where I saw that a husband and wife passed the baby to each other by putting the baby on the floor. But nobody fell out of the chair because most of you know this. It's not unusual to you. You take a 2-month-old baby, put him on the floor. Here, hang on to the tiles for a second while Abba gets you. Carrying a stroller. Sometimes you're in Yerushalayim and you're walking to the Kotel and there's some guy or some girl asking for help carrying a stroller because their husband or their wife can't help them. Because they can't even hold the same object at the same time. Rabbi Yosef ruled, by the way, he's the one who quotes the Teshuvah. And Rabbi Yosef, in a very rare move, rules like a Moroccan rabbi in this situation and says, like, big objects and strollers, these things, there's room to be lenient. But Rabbi Berdugo, it's not his claim to fame, but it's a way to look at halakha differently than the way other people look at things. And his ability to do so, while still being a tzaddik, Rabbi Berdugo has a few teshuvot in this matter. And he felt that stringencies between a husband and a wife ultimately will lead to bigger avirot in other places. He was very particular about this. His bedin, in a number of instances, Rabbi Peretz brings in one of his books that The details are not so important. But he says there, if you want to follow the stringency, which has, it's a stringency that most Jews follow. Many Jews, not most, many Jews follow. It's originally a Kehillat custom. How it became a Jewish one, we're still not sure. And he says if Jews do this, they're going to cause all kinds of terrible averot to happen. And anybody who has the ability to abolish this minhag should have a special place in the world to come. He's very, very particular about these things. So, who listens? I don't know. But that's that. My time is running short.
Just wanted to say, it seems like among the, so especially the Baalei Tshuva community or people who are just learning about Judaism, there's a tendency to not slip up or make mistakes. So there's a tendency to be very literal and very rigid about such things. And I've seen a lot of marital problems come out of that rigidity.
It's not their fault. It's the fault of those who teach them or don't teach them.
It's taught in very general but strict, general and strict at the same time, which doesn't make sense, but it is like that.
It's a dangerous trend. Like you said, families get destroyed over it. Couples are destroyed over it. Children, their lives are destroyed over these things. Ignorance of halakha doesn't take anybody anywhere good. So you're not always looking to be lenient. But to know halakha well enough to know how it works. To not be scared. There are people who, I read for you once here, spiritual paralysis. They're constantly paralyzed. They don't know what to do, so they freeze. And to be frozen your whole life is not a healthy place to be. But just today in the morning, I got a notice from Yerushalayim that someone started doing something similar with Rav Uziel's books. They started doing it for Rav Kook's books also. They're trying to put out his books on halakha. I think that many people don't know the writings of Rav Kook on halakha. It will be very, and I don't know how much the community will follow, but it will be very important that that part of his life will come back to the Jewish community. If I have 5 minutes, where will I take you before we end? Rav Kapach, his students recorded different questions and answers they asked him when they were studying Rambam. So while they were learning with him, and this is what we, the books we're learning, we're going to be learning. So while they were learning those books with him, they asked him questions and he gave answers and they recorded them in separate volumes. The whole new world of his books that are coming out now, Mamash, they're being written now, of recordings of his put into books. Here's an interesting, this set is written by Rabbi Shlomo Toledano. One summer I studied by Rabbi Shlomo Toledano. If you remember, 4 summers ago, I was in Yerushalayim for the summer. Mm-hmm. So in that summer I studied every day by Rav Toledano. Rav Toledano wrote a 4-volume series called Divrei Shalom Ve'emet, protecting alternative, mostly North African, but not always, alternative Sephardic customs from the wrath of the Rabbi Yosef family. And he was, that was pretty much, that's his claim to fame. He's known as the one who argues with the Yalkut Yosef all the time. But he's a very smart man. From what I heard in his synagogue, he has a big throne. And that throne is made for the chief rabbi, who's the son of Rabbi Yosef. For whenever he prays in his synagogue, he has the most important chair in the whole room. He knows how to argue while still keeping the peace. It's a very unique character trait. I wish I had it, but I don't. In this series that he has in Jewish history, which I own 2. Those 2 I already had. But this 3rd one just came out now. He records an interesting phenomenon. Now if I can find it. The first volume of his goes through all the rabbis of the Talmud and the Mishnah. The second is all the rabbis up until the Spanish expulsion. And this book here is all about the rabbis who lived in the generation of the Spanish expulsion right afterwards. I can't find the source right now. Here he writes something interesting. There's a Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi. I told you once that all the ones whose last name is Ashkenazi are really Sephardic and vice versa. So here he records about this entire family who were originally Ashkenazi Jews who became Sephardim. And he says, whereas nowadays we're used to this trend of Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews becoming Ashkenazified, if you could call it that. He said there was a seemingly opposite crisis after the Spanish expulsion, that there were many Ashkenazi Jews who were becoming Sephardic. there was an opposite problem, and there was a crisis that would cause for many people to have a crisis of faith. Like, why are all you abandoning Ashkenazi customs to become Sephardic? Just like you hear the complaint in one direction now, that complaint was mirrored somewhere else. It's interesting how history moves back and forth, and how different trends change, and how things end up. And if I can end somewhere, I will end here. I'll end in 2 places. I have 3 minutes. I was in Hebron. I had a meeting with the former mayor of Hebron. How did he get to me? Hashem runs the world. So he took me around Hebron. What part of Hebron? The part of Hebron I shouldn't tell my parents I went to. That part of Hebron. No armed guards, no bulletproof windows, straight into... This man is part of he runs an organization. He runs an organization with his brother-in-law, and their job is that they buy houses in Hebron that belong to Arabs. They buy them for full money, and they take back house by house by house the Jewish presence in Hebron. He himself has a beautiful house, but he doesn't live in that beautiful house. When he buys a house, so sometimes it takes 9 years to buy that house. Because you have to not just buy the house, it has to be undercover. Because if they find out, the Palestinian Authority finds out that they bought the house, they'll kill this family. Right. You have to smuggle the family out of the country to a safe place. Give them enough money to be able to live off of that transaction that happens. Wow. It's an interesting part of his organization. Well, I'll tell you about it in a second. And what he does is he buys a building. So the building he bought is the closest Jewish house now to the Ma'at HaMachpelah, to the Tomb of the Patriarchs. The closest. You're standing there, you see Ma'at HaMachpelah. Until then, you're farther away. It's the first... In this building, 3 or 4 families moved in. But it's a building that hasn't been renovated in 100 years, 120 years. Who knows how long it hasn't been renovated in. And there are no fences, there are no walls, there are no guards. Their rule is, we will not live in fear in our own city. That's their rule. You can call them stupid, you call them crazy, but that's the rule. And I was in his house, and I said, listen, you're the former mayor. What are you living in this place for? I said, it looks like a I don't want to say anything bad about the house of Israel, but it wasn't his nice house. He said, if I don't move here first, who do you think is going to live here? So his rule is every time they buy a building, he moves in first. He lives there for a year, and then he passes it on to the next family. I mean, if it's good enough for the mayor, it's good enough for you. And that's something, it's more than just putting money behind things. It's actually being part of this project, this land. I was in there, there's a man inside of this building writing Sifrei Torah. That's his job. He sits in this house writing Sifrei Torah. The best part of his project is he doesn't look for donations. He might come visit us one day here. He doesn't look for donations. You donate $200,000, you buy a house in Hebron, it's your house. You own it. They rent it out for you to people in Hebron. You decide one day you want to sell it, sell it. They don't take your money as a donation. They take your money as an investment in the land of Israel and houses in Hebron. It's not a non-profit organization. They're a real estate agency that's buying houses in Hebron to redeem the Jewish quarter. And if you're talking about redeeming Judaism, that's where I am. Tanakh. I came back with a push to get as many people as we can. I hear about the Daf Yomi fever. Everyone is excited about Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi is a good thing. To learn Talmud is a terrific thing. I'm even toying with the idea of starting a Talmud class here in the community. But don't get carried away. Talmud is that. It's Talmud. Daf Yomi will burn you out. I know there are many people at this table who finish Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi is not for everybody. Not for everybody. It's not for most people. Daf Yomi is a very fast-paced learning that ends up being very superficial, that doesn't actually give you great insight into Jewish life or philosophy or halakha. I'm not rating. If you're doing Daf Yomi, don't stop because of me. But to break up a book and say you do 1 page a day, there are some chapters of the Talmud you can finish the whole chapter in 1 day. And there are some pages that you need 3 weeks to do that page. How can you make, just because it's printed on 1 page, make that everything happens in 1 day? It's not just that people sit down and study Daf Yomi for 2 hours a day. I hear today a 15-minute Daf Yomi class. 15 minutes?
10 minutes.
10-minute Daf Yomi, even better.
There's a 5-minute podcast now.
A 5-minute podcast. Now, on one hand, it's good, so people should learn. People should discuss Jewish things. I'm all for it. But if you want to have a serious discipline, 5 minutes a day, don't study Talmud for 5 minutes. Don't do that to the Talmud. Do something else. Study something that's important. What's the Talmud going to give you? Halakha, you're not going to learn from the Talmud. Musar, you're not going to learn from the Talmud. let's be honest, in a week from now, you're not going to remember what you studied last week in 15-minute podcasts.
It's more like brownie points. You do
Oh.
it to say you did it.
Okay, now some people what motivates them is the sense of accomplishment. 1 week in, 2 weeks in, what happens to Erev Pesach? You're busy trying to burn your chametz, you have a page of Gemara, you have to do that. It's not so practical, always, to make it happen. Then you find yourself, you missed 3 days because you went on a business trip, you're 3 days behind, now you're a week behind, now you're 10 days behind, you give up. The pressure of time is not the correct way to study, in my opinion. In my opinion, you don't have to agree with me. But it's a good thing to have a schedule that you learn. So you want to learn Gemara, but don't get stuck. If you fall behind a day, fall behind 5 days, you're going to find yourself in the middle of Yevamot. Yevamot is not as exciting as the Brachot, Shabbat, Sukkah, Megillah, you know those things. Yevamot is like a whole different language in that book. The laws of Nidarim. Remember you say Kuname, Kunache, Kunase. What's the difference in a Kunam and a Kuna? You know the difference? They're going to spend the whole month studying the difference between, what if you say, kunam alai, kunach, you don't even know. Where's a language we don't even know? Now you're trying to figure out legal technicalities in a language of something you're never going to do. The purpose behind it, I'm not sure. There's a book that we do need to know. It's a Tanakh. The Tanakh came back with 4 Tanakhs from Israel. 4 different kinds. They're all the same book, don't worry, but just different. All the old version, Old Testament. The Tanakh that we have is broken up with non-Jewish numbers. You know that? Yeah? So Parashiot that we have, the Parashiot, Bereshit, Shemot, those are Jewish books. Explained over there, we spoke about this on Shabbat. But the rest of the books, Yehoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, those are all Christian numbering. Why do we use the Christian numbering?
You argue with the Christians.
Very good. James of Aragon summons the Ramban for a debate. And he says, hey, do you know that in Isaiah 53 it says, and that doesn't say that in Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53 says something. There is no Isaiah 53. Isaiah ends at 45. He says, what are you talking about? You don't even know your own book. So because the Christians would debate with us, we took their numbers so we would know how to argue with them. And that became the breakdown of the Tanakh. But the Tanakh chapters really end. When you look in the Chumash, and you see samach 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 or pei pei pei, that means that a chapter begins, a chapter ends. So for example, the book of Yehoshua, the first chapter doesn't end in chapter 2. Chapter 3 verse 7 is the end of chapter 1 of Yehoshua according to our rabbis. So it's really two chapters and 7 sentences. That's one chapter.
So it's a recompilation.
It's a recompilation of the Tanakh. If you count how many chapters are in the Nevi'im and the Ketubim, just the Nach part, take out the Chumash, you come out to 293. 293 chapters. If you take out all the Shabbat, what were you supposed to read on Shabbat? You said in the Beit Knesset, you finished the whole parasha, right? So in 52 weeks, you're going to finish all the parashot in the Torah. If you listen to the Torah reading, you will finish the Chumash every single year, right? That's what you do. Everyone does that here. You sit and you listen and you finish the Chumash. So take away all the Shabbatot. Take away all the holidays. You're left with 293 days in the Jewish calendar that correspond to 293 chapters of Tanakh in the Jewish Tanakh, which means that if you start learning Tanakh today, according to the Jewish calendar, in 1 year from today, if you listen to the Torah reading every Shabbat, you will finish every year the whole books of the prophets and the writings and Tehillim and Mishlei and Kehillat and Yeshayahu and Yechasiel and Yirmiyahu, Divrei, all of those books you'll finish. And 1 year, read them a second year, read them a third year, and by year 2 or 3 you'll already know Tanakh by heart. You'll know where to find things. You'll know the whole history of the Jewish people. All the teachings of the prophets, of the Nevi'im, of David HaMelech, of Shlomo HaMelech. I recommend, as a community, we get into learning Tanakh. If you want a list of how the chapters are broken down or a calendar you can join, there's a group called 929. If you put 929 in Google, it's a 3.5 year cycle of Tanakh. And they have 15-minute shiurim if you want to do. If you like your 15 minutes, 15-minute podcast, they tell you there are some big rabbis, Rabbi Ben Ilau, some big names in the Jewish community. And in 3.5 years, you'll finish the cycle of Tanakh with commentaries. But if you want to just do and know Tanakh well, just Sunday through Friday, 6 days a week, 1 chapter a day, 1 Jewish chapter a day. It'll take you, how would you check? How long would it take us? 9 minutes? 10 minutes? If you would
10
read,
minutes.
10 minutes if you read the verses. And you will know Tanakh, all of it, by the end of 1 year for right now.